Hello and welcome to the Trust Factor Podcast, the only podcast that guarantees your success when you implement its divine age-old teachings. A little bit of housekeeping. This week, Friday, my dear friends, you've seen, we have a very special guest, Guidy Mammon. If you don't know the name, you know the face. He was the driving force behind the rallies that took place every Sunday. He made a decision a week after the war broke out. And he picked up the phone and he called some close friends and everybody came. The people who wanted to make a difference stepped up. And that small band of soldiers stepped up and went to Bathurst and Shepherd and started to wave a flag. And from there grew probably the longest running pro-Israel rally in the world since October the 7th had broken out. We're going to speak to Guidy on Friday and we're going to learn about what drives somebody to step up and do that. And you will not be surprised, at least you shouldn't be surprised, because the impetus that got him to step up is exactly what we've been talking about in this podcast since day one. So it should not come as a surprise to you. I look forward to getting your feedback on Friday's interview. Again, I want to congratulate Shimon Blumenthal, a friend who is a supporter who often comments and shares the episodes and the sound bites. He is the winner of last week's book giveaway, Emunah by Rav David Saperman. I've got 8 more copies, my friends. So if you haven't done it yet, share, comment, like any episode. Put it out there. Let us know what you think. You'll be entered into a weekly draw that takes place on Sunday, and the winner's announced on Monday. Still got 8 weeks left, my friend, so plenty of time to get your copy of what is a life-changing manual on how to succeed in this world. Yesterday, I gave you an example. The book gave us an example of a king. A king decrees that X person is going to get rewarded or punishment. They did something good, the king says, reward this individual. He did something bad, the king says this person deserves to be punished. But the king doesn't execute the punishment. The king sends out his emissaries. The king has people who work for him. They do his quote-unquote dirty work, which also includes the good. When somebody has a positive message or a reward to deliver, it's not the king. The king's too busy running the kingdom. The individual who works for the king on his behalf goes and delivers the good news, delivers the award, delivers and executes punishment. That's how it works. Now, that was the illustration, so that to say that the individual who shows up at your door, if you're part of that kingdom, with the reward or the punishment, he's inconsequential. He has no choice. He is the last and therefore the weakest link on the chain of command down from the king. That individual is coming to do the king's work. Now, you may suggest, or you may understand from that there is a hierarchy, and that above the individual who came to your door, there's another individual who he reports to, and above him, another individual who he reports to, until you get to the king. And along that chain of command, everybody has varying degrees of authority to change how many lashes you get, how much of a reward you're given, when it's delivered, how it's delivered. And that may be true when it comes to the physical world, but there is a very big distinction between this world and his world. In his world, and therefore in our real world, when Hashem decrees, it's over. He decrees the extent, the time, and the place, and all of the details surrounding the reward that you're about to get. Or, God forbid, the opposite. And he selects the emissaries, and those emissaries carry out his decree to the nth degree. They have no authority to change it on their own. It's a little bit of a Kabbalistic type idea. They come down to do his work. And there was a story that I heard about recently. I didn't even know this. The story that we all know about Abraham, who was sitting outside of his tent after having been circumcised on the 3rd day, and the 3 angels came walking to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. And what happens? They say to him that they are destroyers, that they came to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, as if to almost strike fear into his heart, which they weren't allowed to do. They weren't allowed to say these things, and therefore they were punished. These angels were punished because they said something that they weren't allowed to even say. When in Hashem's world, my friends, the decree comes directly from Hashem. He has the relationship with you. He doesn't want you to have a relationship with any of his emissaries. He doesn't want you to incorporate other powers or representation of powers into your life, because we as human beings are faulty and frail and weak, and we may think, as we have in the past, in generations past, we may think that we can appeal to one of those intermediaries to step in on our behalf and to change the decree, which is not a possibility. This is also why, my friends, by Pesach, by Passover, when we sit around the Seder table and we read from the Haggadah, we read about all of the 10 plagues that Hashem rained down on the Egyptians. Hashem single-handedly destroyed, brought down to its knees, the world superpower being Egypt at the time. Okay, and the superpower that existed in those days ran the world. Not like today, regions have a little bit of influence here, a little bit of influence over there. They were everywhere and they ran everything. So God comes in single-handedly on behalf of the slaves, this tiny, weak nation, and brings Egypt down to its knees single-handedly while the Jewish nation sat and watched. And the last of the plagues, which was, you'll remember, the killing of the firstborn, it says, Hashem says, I came down, me, myself, no angel, no emissary, it was me. I came down and I did it myself. Take from that what you will. There are many ways to understand that, but the crux of the message is that the king himself got off of his throne and went and did the heavy lifting. How important was that heavy lifting that it required and demanded that Hashem himself step up and do the work? That is an indication of the relationship that we have with our Creator. Remember that, my friends, because that is important as you navigate every single day of your life. This is a God who is willing, unlike kings of flesh and blood, this king is willing to get off of his throne if it means helping his creation and doing the work himself. Another interesting point that's about to be discussed. The Mishnah teaches that in the period before the coming of Mashiach, which is end of days, end of times, it says the face of the generation will be like that of a dog. Yesterday, I gave you the example of an individual who hits a dog with a stick. Why would I give you that example? Because it's brought in the Mishnah, similar example of throwing a stone at a dog. Why a dog? And why bring this example? And the answer is over here. The generation's face in the time of end of days, the coming of Mashiach, will be like that of a dog. Why a dog? And it says over here that when someone throws a stone at a dog, it runs after the stone and bites it. Just like I said yesterday, the dog takes no notice of the one who has the stick in his hand. It says likewise in the period before the coming of Mashiach, when Hashem chastises the Jewish people by means of a sinful government or a harsh dictator, people will try to find ways to appease or combat their oppressors and often give no notice to the one who casts the oppression upon them. My friends, guilty as charged, right here. I have big problems accepting the decrees of rogue governments, of people like Justin Trudeau, Mark Carney, people who are failed leaders who have come in and have simply lined their pockets, destroyed the country so outwardly, have brought in untold scores of third world nation people who are the criminals of those nations, not just bringing them in, but they've emptied out the prisons in India. You don't take my word for it. Go online and look, and you'll see ambassadors, you'll see higher ups in the Indian government scratching their heads in public wondering, why has the Canadian government emptied out our prisons? Why aren't they vetting the people that they're bringing into their countries? No coincidence that is why we have record crime. I don't recognize this country. I was born and raised here. 50 years I've spent here. This is not the same country I grew up in, and not in a good way, my friends. The violence, the crime, the gap between the have and the have-nots, the price of basic groceries, the instability of the markets that we're in right now. And this has all transpired just in the last 10 years where we've been under liberal leadership. Now me, guilty as charged. I blame the leaders. I blame the people who are in positions of power. And you may say, rightly so, that's the person who's calling the shots. That's the person who's pulling the strings. That's the person who's making the laws. And so, yeah, in a physical world that we are put in, it makes sense to draw that connection. But somebody who understands what we've been teaching in this podcast knows that God put that person in place. There is a reason that person is here running this country. And there is a message in it for us to get very clearly. If you don't like what he's doing, step up and do something about it. Do something about it either here while you remain here, or pick up and move to a place where God prefers you to be, where you won't have to deal with these things. That is the message. The message is not to fight them, to try and get upset at them, and it ruins your day, and you're miserable about it, and you can't function, and you don't have clarity. No, then you've missed the point. Recognize that there's a message in there. God put that individual in the place of power over you. And so therefore, what's the message to you? You will hear this coming Friday from Guidy, who got the message. The message that was being sent to the Jewish community at the time was run and hide. Run and hide, because we don't know what's going to happen. Don't wear your kippas. Don't wear your Magen Davids. Don't send your kids to Hebrew schools. Run and hide. Hide in your basements. And what did he do? He said, not on my watch. And he got up with a small group of fighters, and they went to Bathurst and Shepherd. And at that point, they became a force to be reckoned with. Before that point, we were just their subjects. After that point, we became a very, very powerful and strong voice of advocacy, not just for the Jewish people, but for the state of Israel. Thank you for spending time with us on the Trust Factor podcast. If you've heard something today that moved you, save this episode and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss upcoming conversations that challenge, empower, and uplift. And if you're on social media, connect with us. Leave your thoughts. Drop a quote that resonated with you. Hashtag the Trust Factor podcast. Until next time, keep growing in your trust and keep living with purpose. I'm Jesse Revivo, and this has been the Trust Factor podcast. Thanks for listening.